RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All of your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros, competitions, whatever's on your mind, it is all on the table. Speaking of competitions, that's where we'll throw it to Dave Palumbo. Dave, this past weekend out in Las Vegas, the NPC USA Championships, an exciting show, a show that you and Chris Aceto talked about on Heavy Muscle Radio. Tomorrow, you have an entire lineup of interviews, a lineup, of course, including Shane Stewart, the overall winner.
Yeah, Chris and I didn't get to go this year, which was the first year that one of us wasn't there, at least. We used to always both go, but, you got kids now, and the show takes 40 days to get through because there's 1,000 competitors. No, I miss going to these shows, but obviously, my itinerary is a little different nowadays, especially with the new babies and everything like that. But the great thing is that all the guys that won really wanted to be interviewed, and they kind of contacted me through their coaches and stuff like that, and I contacted a couple of them. And so we're going to have all the top winners on. We have the super heavyweight first and second. We have the overall winner, Shane Stewart, obviously, the light heavy. We have the heavyweight winner. And a lot of these guys are going to be doing pro shows like in Tampa next week. So it's going to be great to get them not only off their wins and their pro card victories, but then also what they got to look forward to this coming weekend in Tampa. So I'm excited. I always love the USA. I love the Nationals. Like I said, I might have some disputes with sometimes how things are run, but the bottom line is that the camaraderie in that show and what comes out of that show, the new talent that we then get into the IFBB, and which will change the scope and the landscape of the IFBB, is unparalleled. So I'm super excited, and I think you guys are going to enjoy these interviews because a lot of these guys are new guys, and we don't really know much about them. So it's good when you get new blood in there, so to speak, and see where these guys came from, how they got to where they are, and what they think about where they're going.
Shane Stewart, of course, the overall winner. Dave, a lofty comparison made by you. I believe you said he reminds you of a younger Branch Warren. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I think he liked that comparison too. The funny thing is that when Branch turned pro in 2002, I believe it was, he won the heavyweight class at the Nationals. He was just, he was impressive. He had big legs, and he had like a good structure, and he was ripped to the bone. But never in my wildest dreams did I think he would morph into the mass monster that he became, in the IFBB. So I see like a similar look when Branch was younger and just turned pro to Shane. I don't know if Shane will turn into a Branch Warren, but if he does, it'll be an interesting parallel for sure.
Let's get to the questions. The first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. The first question, the pros and cons to using propionate over a cypionate or anathenate, any difference in results at all?
When I first started and I was reading, I used to read the Anabolic Reference Guide by Bill Phillips, and they would say, testosterone propionate, short-acting testosterone aromatizes less because it's in the body for a shorter period of time. The long-acting esters stay there a longer period of time, but they tend to aromatize more theoretically, supposedly causing more fluid retention and stuff like that. But what I experienced, from using this stuff for 13 years that I was on it, was that there was no difference. Testosterone is testosterone. The side effects are the same. If you're taking propionate every other day, you're getting the same effects as if you're taking, one shot or 2 shots of anathenate or cypionate a week. So the effects are cumulative. And also what I realized was that water retention is meaningless because when you're on a low-carb diet, you don't hold any water. When you're on a high-carb diet, you hold water no matter what drugs you take. And if you want to get rid of water before a show, you don't have to go off the drugs. You take, you restrict fluid the last 24 hours, you take sodium out, and you take a diuretic, and that's how you get rid of water. So once again, it becomes irrelevant when we talk about water, fluid. So many people are preoccupied with fluid retention. They think it's the same thing as body fat. It's not. The difference is body fat you have to burn off. Fluid you can get rid of in hours. It can be gotten rid of with the right diuretic. So it really doesn't matter which testosterone you use. And what I found was that I struggled with using propionate for many years, sore, achy, because I just was very allergic to that propionate ester, as a lot of people are. And I found that when I took cypionate and anathenate, I never had any pain anywhere. So I said, you know what, screw this at some point. I said, I'm not using propionate anymore. And probably the last 5 years of my career, I never used propionate. And I looked probably better those 5 years than I ever did. So I just don't think that there's any reason to have to use one ester over another. And that's just the way it is. I'm just telling you the truth.
Second question, Dave, pick one for the best gains and explain to us why. Test at 500 a week with A, 50 mg Anavar per day, B, 50 mg Winstrol EOD, C, 100 mg Masteron EOD, or D, 100 mg Primo EOD. Well,
Masteron is a stronger drug of all the ones that they listed. So if test and Masteron, you're going to get the best results from it. And Masteron is really a hardening agent because it's kind of an aromatase inhibitor. It kind of inhibits, prolactin to a certain degree. So I would have to go with testosterone and Masteron.
Let's go to the Instagram questions. Again, you can follow us on official_RxMuscle. Let's go to Holes Watt 127. We get a lot of hair questions. My hair always gets dry when on cycle. We always talk about hair loss, but he's talking about dryness in his hair. Can you explain that?
That's an interesting observation, and I don't know if dryness has anything to do with with hair falling out or not. Sometimes I believe that when you take anabolic steroids, that they kind of direct all the protein that you're eating into muscle. If that makes sense. This sounds like a Ronnie Coleman explanation, but it doesn't sound very scientific. But I always felt that steroids direct protein into the muscles for protein synthesis, build muscle, and sometimes maybe you're shorting your hair and maybe you're shorting your nails. So in other words, the nails and hair beds are not getting as much protein as that they should be getting because the muscles are sucking up all the needed resources, so to speak, to build and repair muscle tissue, directed by the anabolic steroids. So the steroids basically are protein, are partitioning agents that direct, all the nutrients in the body to go to muscle building and repair. So I don't know if that's the truth or not. It's always anecdotally what I thought in my mind, but it is possible. Same thing with essential fatty acids. Rather than going to the hair and it's going and skin, it's going to the muscles. Because remember, all the muscle cells are made up of essential fatty acids as well, the cell membranes, that is. So is that the right answer? I don't know, but it sounds like a plausible explanation.
Ripped Grizzly, you've explained the Clen protocol incredibly many times, but I can't remember ever hearing about how we should taper off.
I usually, no matter how much you're taking, let's say you're taking the max, which I always recommend being 120 micrograms per day. Immediately after the show, I usually have guys drop down to 20 micrograms twice a day for a week, and then I have them drop down to 20 micrograms per day, once a day, for a week, and then I have them go off. So it's a 2-week taper off period, and that seems to work pretty well.
Let's go to Swolberham O'Neill. Dave, we've heard you talk a lot about diuretics in the past, but not much about herbal diuretics. I personally use dandelion root, and it works wonders for me as far as dropping overall water is concerned. Could you talk about how herbal diuretics work compared to prescription diuretics?
Yeah. I used to produce a product called Aqualize. It was, to me, Uva ursi is the herb that's the most potent in terms of fluid loss, water loss. I combined it with a little dandelion and some B6, and these are just, natural diuretics. Aqualize worked terrifically. It had a tremendous following. The problem is that you have minimums to produce, and I would produce it, but I wouldn't sell enough of them to make it. I would always, at the last minute when the expiration dates were coming up, I would still have 1,000 bottles or 500 bottles left, and it was a pain in the neck, so I kind of discontinued it. I might restart it again if I can get smaller minimums on it. But a lot of these companies, you can't get the pricing you want unless you do the minimums. I love the herbals. I think they work great. The problem is they work differently in everyone's body. So as a prep coach, I want something that delivers precise, absolutely known fluid loss. So I know that if I give a half a diazide to someone, I know how much fluid they're going to lose from that, okay? If they have a lot of fluid to lose, I know if I give them a whole diazide, how much they're going to lose. If I give them, 2 Aqualize with every meal, 5 or 6 times a day, depending on how many meals they're eating, I know generally how much fluid they're going to lose. But it's kind of like I'm experimenting, and it depends on people's bodies, how they absorb it, how much fluid they're drinking with it. So herbals are a little less predictable. But I've used them a lot with different competitors. There are competitors that compete naturally. There are competitors that don't want to use a diazide or they can't get it. And so I use herbals all the time. I just find that the prescription ones are you use less of them and they're more predictable.
Cody Plum competing in the Washington State Open this weekend as a super heavyweight, 237.5 pounds. Last 3 weeks, I've been carb cycling 3 low, 220G, 1 high, 500G, 1 hour, 50 minutes cardio per day. I use Diazide as my diuretic. This has gotten me in very good condition, body fat very low. My question is, what is the best way to introduce carbs and water after competing, and how soon do you go back into training and cardio? This is my only show of the year, so that I don't need to worry about preparing for another show.
You know, after a show, I usually just kind of eat what I want, you know, for the first couple days. What I found in the past is that the worst thing you can do is just stop taking diuretics. Because the first 24 hours after you compete, you're going to still be flushing. You know, those Diazides keep working, you know, so to speak. Even herbals keep working. So if you compete on Saturday, you can eat whatever you want Saturday night and Sunday. You're still going to be flushing. By Monday, you're starting to gain a little weight. Tuesday, Wednesday, by the end of you think you're out of the danger zone at the end of the week, the following week. But that's when you're just really starting to retain a lot of water. Because what happens is when you don't drink and you take diuretics, your aldosterone levels go through the roof, which is your body's hormone that tells your body to absorb sodium and water. Think about it. You're flushing water out. You're flushing sodium out. Your body doesn't know what's going on. It wants to retain the stuff. So what does it do? It releases more aldosterone. Now the show's over. You start drinking and eating again, and there's aldosterone's through the roof. So your body's retaining all the sodium and water, every bit that you drink and eat. And there's no way around it. So what you need to do is you need to stay on a little Diazide. So let's say Monday comes around, and you take a half a Diazide maybe on Monday and another half on Tuesday. What you're doing is you're just pushing the extra water out of your body. You don't want to restrict fluid, and you don't want to restrict sodium. That's a mistake. If you do that, you're going to create the same rebound effect. If you continue to eat sodium and drink plenty, and you're just flushing out the extra water with the Diazide, okay, you're going to eventually equilibrate, I'm telling you. But if you restrict, if you go back to that diet and don't eat sodium and restrict your water, you're going to rebound again when you stop it. So just go eat what you want. You know, obviously don't become a glutton. Don't eat like 1,000 grams of carbs a day right off the bat every single day, or you're gonna retain a ton amount of fluid also. But if you go back to eating, you know, and having maybe one cheat meal a day as opposed to eating the whole entire day, junk food, you know, and you stay on a little bit of Diazide, you're eventually going to get, about after a week, you should be good. Usually about 3 or 4 days on doing a half a Diazide a day is usually enough to get you back to that baseline level.
C. Phipps D. Fit recently switched to keto. Main sources of fat are grass-fed beef, avocado, species macadamia nut oil, and almonds and cashews. At this point, is omega-lyse totally necessary?
Yes. I'll tell you why. Because macadamia nut oil does have a little bit of omega-3 and 6 fats. As a matter of fact, they're perfectly balanced 1-to-1. But it's not a lot. Macadamia nut oil, olive oil, even nuts. They're basically, let's just stick with macadamia nut oil and avocado oil and olive oil. Those are predominantly sources of monounsaturated fats. They're healthy fats. They're omega-9 healthy fats, but they're not essential fats. So you need your omega-lyse to get those omega-3 and 6s that your body doesn't really get in the diet very easily. It's an insurance policy, because if you don't take in enough essential fats, your body will sense it's in a fat-deprived state and it will hoard fat. Okay, and a lot of the bodily processes, including muscle repair, won't take place at optimal levels. So you definitely want to take omega-lyse. Okay, then the other sources of fat, you know, are kind of like, you know, just for health purposes and for metabolism boosting effects. I use macadamia nut oil when I cook. I put it on my foods for taste, but I'm doing that for the health benefits of it and because I feel that it stimulates my metabolism. It's really not being consumed because it's an essential fat. The essential fats come once again from the fish oil and the evening primrose oil, which is in the omega-lyse formula.
We actually have a couple of different questions, both asking the same thing, but for their particular areas. We have one inquiry as far as when Species Nutrition will go to South Africa, and another for Latin America. The second part of the South Africa question is about extra vitamins and minerals one needs to supplement with besides a good multivitamin, and what dosages, also benefits of each that you might mention.
What was that last thing you said? The benefits of what?
No, the last one is also what are the health and physical benefits of each that you might mention. So I guess the additional vitamins and minerals, right?
Here's the problem. I'd love to be in every country in the world. if you guys know distributors that want to carry the product, feel free to contact me and put me in touch with them. I'd love to work with them. A lot of time the issue is price, because shipping internationally is expensive, and sometimes these manufacturers or these distributors want to make a huge margin. And my product line is a high-end product line. It has to be sold that way. It's not the cheapest products out there. It's not the most expensive, but it's not the cheapest either. So, and I'm not going to cheapen the products so that people overseas are going to buy it. I'm not going to sell, like I know a lot of these companies will sell a cheap rate version of their products in the Middle Eastern countries, in Africa, because it's China, because it's cheaper to give to the customer there, but it's not the same product. So I won't do that. Okay, I'd rather not sell there. Having said that, if the line that I sell of Species products is so complete that there's really not that much you need to add to it. V mineralizes all the vitamins, okay, essential vitamins, minerals, trace metals, and polyphenolics coming from fruit and vegetable extracts. It's all in one product. And then all the essential fats, okay, which were left out of the multivitamins, you can't really mix them in there, are in omega lyes. So those two cover that. And then you got your fiber lyes, which covers your fiber. The only thing you really need to add, and I've said this before, is I would add an extra 5,000 units of vitamin D3. I already have 2,000 in my product, but I think 7,000 IUs of vitamin D3 per day is perfect. That's just my experience. That usually brings your levels up to the normal level on blood work. Unless you're outside with no shirt on every day for 20, 30 minutes, then you might not need as much vitamin D because your body might be able to synthesize it. But I always say better safe than sorry. The only other supplements I really recommend is I use a product called Juice Plus that I really like. It's a fruit and vegetable extract product. It's not a vitamin product, but it's a fruit and vegetable extract. I just think it's good for good health. Not necessary. It's a luxury item, I call it. But it's something that I use. I also take extra CoQ10, because it's good for the heart and the efficiency of the heart rate. So I do add that in. There's a couple others I add in. I don't think they're necessary, but if you're over 35, over 40, probably taking 100 to 200 milligrams of CoQ10 a day is probably not a bad idea, just to keep your heart functioning well. Obviously then, every couple of months I'll alternate this in and out. I'll use kidney stuff from my DavePalumbo.com website for my kidney function, for creatinine and BUN to keep that down in normal range. And I use Bill Llewellyn's, which I also sell at DavePalumbo.com. I use his liver stable product I mentioned earlier also. And why do I do that? Because just to keep my liver healthy, keep the kidney tubules open, keep everything flushing out of your body. And that's really it. I mean, those are all those are really all I use. Then every maybe couple of months I'll work in another supplement just to see how I feel on it. Right now I'm using these ostrich peptides for immune system, and I want to just see how they work. I was sent a bottle of them, and I want to see if they work well. If they do, then I will recommend them. And that's usually what I do. Usually every other month or so I'm testing a new product to see if it's something that I want to incorporate into my regimen or not, or maybe even advise you guys to. I just started, TitanMedicalCenter.com sent me their TB4, thymosin beta 4, which is a healing peptide. And I just started taking that. So I'm going to see how I feel on that, and I'll report. We'll do a video probably next week on that, or maybe this week, end of this week, about how I've been feeling on it. I've been actually feeling pretty good and recovering from my workouts well. So there's always something I'm testing out, but once again, the items that I mentioned are the absolutes you must use. Everything else is a luxury item.
Olympia 6 weeks away, so of course we're going to be expecting a lot of Olympia-related questions. AZY107. Dave, what do you think Big Ramy has to do to win the Olympia? Is it conditioning in and of itself, or is it something else, or something else needed beyond conditioning?
No, I think it's just a conditioning issue. And I'm going to say I think that there's a good chance I'm going to be at the Olympia this year. A lot of people have been asking, and I first said no, and I might be going, pretty sure. We have a sponsor. We'll probably announce that in the next week or so. And we're going to be covering the show. But I think that if Ramy can bring conditioning, and look, Bader has sent you a couple videos that I've done some analysis on, Sid, and I think that Ramy looks really good. Even Chris Aceto said he looks really good for 5 weeks or 6 weeks out, whatever it is, from the Olympia. If he can continue to improve from this point on, and no one tries to pull any crazy things with insane carb ups and stuff like that, he could beat Phil. He's got the tool set to beat him. If he can bring the same conditioning as Phil with the mass that he's got, no way Phil can take him.
Good one here from Big Popeye John. Again, a lot of our fans like to ask you about your bodybuilding career and stuff that you did during your career. What were some of your daily routines you would do every day that you believe benefited your bodybuilding career?
You want to know what my routine was? It was wake up like late because I would go to bed really late, and I always wanted to sleep like 8 or 9 hours. Sometimes I'd wake up at 1 in the afternoon, to be honest with you. I'd get my ass in the shower. I would get out of the house. I'd go right to McDonald's. I'd have my 6 cheeseburgers there, usually on 2 buns, large fry, 2 apple pies, and then I would usually go to the gym. I'd usually do some shopping if I had to get some stuff, groceries or whatever, and eventually I'd wind up at the gym somewhere. I'd train. Usually I have a post-workout shake, and then I would usually go tanning. I would go, if I had to go buy clothing or something like that. I don't know. I really didn't have a lot to do. I was living the dream. I was living the bodybuilding dream style. I would go home at night. I would usually buy some dinner. I'd go maybe for sushi, or I'd buy like 3 Chinese food meals and have them in the house because I was eating every 2 hours around the clock. I was drinking a lot of shakes, obviously. And, I did a lot of my computer work at night. Obviously, back in the 90s and early 2000s, the computer wasn't quite what it is now. There was no social media, but I had emails to answer. I would post on some forums. I would, search the net for information. I would read up. I was always trying to, educate myself. And that was my life. It was very simple. There was no responsibilities, essentially. I would, at that time in the 90s, I was actually breeding Persian cats. So I would spend like a couple hours at night, cleaning them up and just checking if they had kittens or whatever the case may be. That was my kind of diversion at that point. But, I try to keep it simple. I try to take naps in the middle of the day after I trained, if possible, just to help recover. For a while, I was training people out of Bally's, and when I was doing personal training in the morning, then I was getting up a lot earlier. Obviously, I was getting up at 8 o'clock, going to train people from 9 to 12. I'd go train with my friend Doug Wentz. We'd come back. Then I'd come home and I would take a nap usually, and that's probably when I did my biggest growing years. Later in my career, I started becoming a light riser, and I wasn't doing the naps as much. I was just sleeping later in the afternoon. But I was at the end of my career at that point. I didn't have to put much muscle on. But when I was in my growth stages, sleep was super important. I really believe. Think about what a baby does. A baby sleeps like almost around the clock and that's when it's doing its most growing. So as long as you're putting the food in, you're not missing meals from sleeping, which I never would. I would get up and eat, and I would go back to sleep. You're going to grow way better, okay, if you're getting a lot of sleep. I know a lot of guys I work with, they work really tough jobs. They only get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, and they have trouble putting weight on, and they have trouble losing body fat because their body is not recovering properly. So sleep, sleep, sleep.
Kyle Marinucci, is marinating chicken breast in white vinegar pre-contest bad for the breast protein? Does it devalue the chicken breast?
No, it's fine. It's fine. You can use marinades and stuff like that as long as there's no sugar in them or carbs. A lot of people, you can start adding extra stuff, but if you're only using vinegar, that's fine. Soy sauce is great too. Just make sure you buy like Kikkoman soy sauce that doesn't have the added sugar to it. That's a big mistake that people do make. You can add a lot of calories to your food if you're using condiments that have carbs in them and you're not aware of it or you're just being ignorant. Read your labels. The labels don't lie.
Taily Alley, milk thistle, does it affect androgen receptors?
No. All milk thistle does is open up the bile ducts in the liver and make them wider. Instead of them getting pinched off, they're open. When they're open, the liver can dump the waste out that it's detoxifying and get rid of it. And once it dumps it into the intestinal tract, it just gets eliminated from your body when you poop. So that's the easiest way to do things. I mean, the problem is that when the liver is being overworked, it inflames. Any kind of overwork syndrome will cause chronic inflammation. And inflammation in the liver is going to pinch these bile ducts off, and it's not going to allow the waste to pass through these small ducts. And when that happens, that's when you get problems, because then the fluid backs up in the liver and you get fibrotic tissue being laid down. Sometimes you can get cyst formation where all these toxins have nowhere to go. And so the body just encapsulates them in a cyst that sits on top of the liver. And I've seen that in a lot of people out there. So you got to be very careful.
Jimmy Massium, Dave, I have an abdominal hernia surgery coming up in 2 weeks. What do you recommend I do over the recovery period to maintain my mass and maybe even look better at the end, which sounds like a range where I can start with light cardio and work my way back to full activity in 6 to 8 weeks?
The key is make sure you keep eating. Don't miss meals. Don't think because you're not in the gym that you don't have to eat, that you only have to eat twice a day. It's insane. You should continue eating as if you've never stopped working out. Because if you've been working out, religiously for long periods of time, it's going to take your body a really long time before it's completely healed up, maybe 2 weeks. And by then, you're going to already start feeling good again. So don't miss meals.
Big Rocky Sosa, peak week essentials in terms of how to manipulate carbs, water, sodium.
Yeah, I mean, I have a protocol that I use with pretty much everyone, and different for men and women, but the protocol is pretty much the same. It just gets tweaked according to the person. To not do anything is foolish. You got to have a game plan that last week.
The Atomic Beast, have you heard this statement that vitamin D should be regarded more as a hormone rather than a vitamin? Why do some people claim this?
Well, when you look at the structure of vitamin D3, it looks like a steroid hormone, which it really is. It's a steroidal hormone, or at least a precursor to one. So, which is interesting when you think about, that being deficient in it might actually inhibit some anabolism that's going on in the body. So that's even another reason why you should supplement with vitamin D.
Philip Rowe, what do you think about feeder workouts, parentheses, few sets every day of 100 reps for arms, shoulders to get blood into the muscle and get more growth? Rich Piana talked about them as one of the best advice he gave on YouTube. Does it work for natural bodybuilders? I've tried this, never been able to stick with it for long. Is it worth it?
I put feeder workouts up there with bridging between steroid cycles, which is basically never going off a steroid. Okay? When you overtrain, in other words, if you have a weak muscle, okay, the reason it's weak, assuming you're training properly, is that it's probably not able to recover as quickly as some of the good body parts you have. So what do people do? They train it more. And what does that do? It makes it break down more, and it repairs itself even less. And long term, you wind up losing muscle rather than gaining muscle. So I think it's a terrible idea. I think once in a blue moon, if you once a month maybe, you throw an extra workout in there. Let's say you have weak shoulders, or let's say you have weak pecs. And you usually do chest once a week. You train it really hard. Maybe once in a while, you just throw an extra chest workout in there, just to really stimulate that muscle, give it a little extra. But if you did it every week, you would overtrain that muscle. So you don't want to do it every single day, but once in a blue moon, you throw an extra workout in there. I think it's terrific.
Excellent 187. I want my daughter to be healthy and strong, going as she grows up. Should I follow the same sort of approach nutrition-wise as I would in terms of the macros, or just let her be and eat whatever other kids would generally be eating? Your approach with your kids?
My son's still too young, but I would like them to eat well. I don't think you should just let them eat what they want. I think if you have knowledge about nutrition, it's good to impart some of it, but not be a Nazi about it. Not be like like where you're whipping the kid if the kid has an M&M or something like that once in a while. You can't do that. But I try to make my son at least be exposed to healthy foods on a regular basis. But I allow him to have a treat. I actually enjoy watching him have a treat once in a while. We go to McDonald's, every once in a while. I'll let him have a piece of pizza. If we go to like a buffet, my wife will have him, he'll just share a dessert with her. He might have some ice cream or some carrot cake. But most of his meals are very healthy, and I think that's what you have to do. There has to be balance in their lives, because otherwise they'll become dysfunctional eaters and they'll have eating disorders, especially when they're super young. But if you expose them to 90% of their food being healthy, that's enough. They can handle a little junk food. It's when the kids eat all junk food, that's the problem.
Jim Manis, Dave, I know this question has been asked a lot of times, but I would appreciate a short answer. What are my alternatives for Clomid in PCT? Almost killed myself in my last PCT because of Clomid side effects.
Yeah, you could use Nolvadex. Nolvadex is, or tamoxifen does the same thing as Clomid, essentially. It blocks estrogen receptors. Whether it be on the breast tissue or in the brain, it doesn't really matter. It does the same thing. Clomid, blocks the estrogen receptors on the hypothalamus in the brain and allows it to not be turned off by estrogen. Okay, and so therefore the hypothalamus keeps working. It sends signal to the pituitary sends signal to the testicles, and everything keeps going. Okay, if you don't have that there, okay, and the estrogen can bind to those hypothalamic receptors, it's going to shut off testosterone production completely.
Time for a couple of more. Howard 9, is HGH we're taking in the off-season bulk when its main use at low dose is fat burning, skin, etc.?
It's really not, even at low dose, its main function is not fat burning. It's muscle building and repair via IGF-1 release from the liver. So you take a shot of GH, the GH goes to the liver degrades it and releases IGF-1. So that's the benefit of it. So and I think it works great because you don't have to take a lot of it. A small amount works well. It's just consistently using it.
Last question from Bassier C. Dave, the best workout for chronic knee pain. All compound movements bother me. I've tried all various foot and leg placements. So we get a lot of questions for those suffering from chronic knee pain. So he wants to know the best workout you would recommend for those suffering from chronic knee pain.
You know, I had a knee issue when I first started, before I ever took an anabolic steroid. For some reason, it was driving me crazy. I couldn't do legs. And I met a physical therapist at a bar. And this girl told me that what you should do is tape your knee. She was an athletic trainer too. Tape your knee inward. So if here's my legs, I'm taping my knee towards the middle of my body, pushing the kneecap into the proper place because I was getting pain under the kneecap. And she said, you have a tracking problem, okay? And she's like, it's not going to be fun having that tape holding your knee over, but it's going to functionally work. And I started doing that, and it was helping a little bit, okay? And then I wanted to do my first anabolic cycle, and I kept saying to myself, I want to wait till I'm healthy so I get trained. And then I said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll feel better if I take because I got so frustrated. I just started taking the anabolic cycle, and I'll tell you, within 3 weeks, my knee pain went away. So, but I think also that it was the fixing the tracking of it that really helped. So my suggestion is, go see an ART guy, and have them work on the knee and the tissues around there. Try to get massages on a regular basis to keep the quads nice and soft and pliable. And if that doesn't work, obviously you want to take joint, supplements. I would recommend taking Arthrolyze 5 pills twice a day. You're going to certainly feel relief. You'll feel some extra lubrication in the joint, and that might be your ticket to salvation, so to speak. But ultimately, if you go and get an X-ray done and you find out you have very little cartilage in there, you might want to get a Synvisc shot, which is basically injecting liquid synovial fluid or gel-like synovial fluid into the joint, and then it kind of just lubricates everything, and that a lot of times helps people too.
One more quick hitter, and this one from Camille B. Bodybuilding. Not sure if you've addressed this in the past, but if you had to say someone was your mentor in the sport, whether now or in your bodybuilding career, who would it be?
I say probably I have two. Dr. Scott Conley, who invented Metrex, was definitely a mentor of mine in terms of not drugs, but supplements, protein metabolism, the science of what's going on, and that's why a lot of my rants are based on stuff that he's given me. And luckily, I always agreed with everything he said pretty much. Another mentor of mine, probably from a friendship and I guess you could say drug standpoint, would be Dr. Mike Kaufman, who was a dermatologist up in Westchester, and he was a big time bodybuilder. He invented a lot of exercise equipment machines and stuff like that. And he was just brilliant, this guy. And he really was a mentor. I mean, we used to stay up till like 4 in the morning. He used to like to train at this gym he had a key to. I'd be there from 4 in the morning just asking him like question after question after question. And he loved it. He loved to have these discussions. We had really crazy, like theoretical discussions about what we can do and how we can alter muscle, size and recovery and different supplements and different drug cocktails. And I learned a lot from those discussions. Even if some of the stuff was gibberish, it didn't matter. It was an exercise in using our minds to develop better protocols. And a lot of my protocols I've developed because of him and because of those discussions. So I want to thank him. He's up with the big guy up there. So may he rest in peace.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask Dave. Again, we'd be remiss, Dave, if we didn't mention throughout the course of the week, especially on today's episode with a lot of the questions that we've been getting, a lot of people sending their prayers to you, to your father, your family. Obviously, you're going through a very difficult time. So I wanted you to know that RxMuscle Nation has been sending their best really throughout the course of the week, and they've all been supportive of you and in your corner during your difficult time.
Yeah, no, I want to thank people. I've gotten a lot of great response from people, and I didn't even think about it when I first started putting it up. But the community does rally behind people when things are the chips are down, so to speak. And it's always tough to lose a parent. My dad's a little older, which makes it a little easier. Obviously, I lost my mom when she was 42 and I was 14. That was tough. My dad's a little easier, but it's still he's been there so long now. I just expect him to always be there. And once again, he's going to be moving on to a better place, and he'll be up with the other Jedis up there in heaven, overlooking me and hoping to make sure I make the right decisions and protecting me when I don't. And, I appreciate it. Obviously, eventually when my dad does let go, it'll probably be a sad time for me. I think right now I'm a little numb to the situation, just trying to keep everything in order. But, it's tough losing a parent, and a lot of people out there can relate to that. And I think that's why I've gotten a lot of great responses from people giving me their own personal, encounters with memory loss and old age and dementia and stuff like that, and how to deal with it. And Chris Aceto and I talk about it on the radio a lot because his dad's kind of going through the same thing. So, it is what it is. It's part of life. It's the cycle of life, and I appreciate all the loving and loving words and prayers.
And on that note, that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave, again brought to you by Species Nutrition. For Dave Palumbo and our producer Tyler Shore, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.